are you doing, Ivan?
Man, I'm doing well. Life is good. Life is good, I gotta say. How about you, Rob?
I'm not mad about it. I got some good stuff going on. I can walk again. Last time we talked, I don't think I could walk.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Really
I
happy to
got
hear
two
that, dude.
working legs. Thanks, man. Quite the
Hey,
journey. Uh,
definitely.
we had a great chat last time, but it was a little short, and I wanted to bring you back because there's some stuff that I specifically wanted to get into with you that I think your opinion is it's funny. We don't know each other super well. We've really only talked that one time. But literally, if
hmm
I could make a list of people that I would want to talk to about these things, it's like you're like at the top of that list still. And I'm like, I still just want to know what this fucking guy thinks. And I think
Shit,
it's
I appreciate that.
because, no, I mean it as a compliment for sure. I hope you appreciate it. It is
Oh yeah,
for
no, I hear that as a
me,
compliment.
yeah. For me, it's like, let's just get to it, man. Fucking AI is the main thing I want to talk to you about. And I want to also talk to you about 3D printing because you're like really
Oh,
into that
cool.
shit too, right?
Yeah, oh, definitely.
Okay, awesome.
Definitely.
So
Yeah, yeah. Both of these
let's
things.
start. We'll start with background, and then I'll get into all my amateur, unfounded opinions, which I know you're a big fan of. So
Sure.
let's start with the 3D printing thing first, just to help me understand
Okay.
kind of where you discovered an interest in that, and then how
hmm
does someone who just sees a video or reads an article, how does someone go then from being like, I'm gonna get a printer and I'm gonna learn the software and I'm like, what, dude? I wouldn't even fucking. I start with Google, but I have no idea
Sure.
where I would go.
Absolutely. Well, I was that person who started with a YouTube video and an article, trying to figure out what to do. 3D printing is always something that fascinated me. And the only reason I didn't get into it sooner is because I thought it would be prohibitively expensive, which it turns out it's not. You can get a 3D printer for $200 these days and filament for $20 a roll, which will last you a decent amount of time. So once I found that out, I bought a 3D printer like next day and just like, boom, we're doing it. And so learning the software is surprisingly easy. Most printers come with software already included on a flash drive that they come with, or an SD card.
That makes
Um,
sense.
Otherwise, yeah, yeah. Otherwise, you'll be able to pretty easily find it through Google. You'll need a software called a slicer, or that's the type of software. The most common one that's free is called Kira,
What is a
and
slice? What
basically
does the name slicer mean? That sounds really severe.
So, and actually, it's pretty cool. So when you have a
Okay.
3D file, you put it in the slicer, and the slicer then takes that 3D file and turns it into a file that the printer can read. And so in
Okay.
that file, you're going to be determining the resolution of the print, the size of the print, um, what the temperature of the filament is going to be like. You can get very technical with it, or you can just go super basic.
Hmm.
But basically, what happens when you're printing an object is it's squirting out this plastic and
Right. That's the
building
filament.
layer on layer on layer on layer vertically. Yes. So what's happening in the slicer is it's taking your object and it's slicing it into every single one of those layers that the printer then does boom, boom,
Like those
boom, boom,
fucking
boom.
puzzles from the 90s of like the Statue of Liberty where you got to put them all and stack them on top until it builds it.
Yes. Yes, exactly like that.
Got it. I remember those.
Exactly.
They're really fucking hard.
Yeah, right. So
I would
fortunately, we have machines to
computer
do
would
it
be
for us
great.
now.
Yeah,
Yes.
good.
So yeah, so basically, once you've got the printer and the slicer, you just need to find your files, and they are free and abundant on the internet.
Just like Wild West
So,
style right now.
oh, absolutely. Now there are
That's
definitely
cool.
people who will sell their files, and you
Sure.
will
Why wouldn't I
usually
mean
get
if you
higher quality
designed it?
files.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So like for example, I 3D printed a suit of Mandalorian armor to cosplay in recently, and
What?
those were purchased files, and
Right.
then printed and finished by me, right? But the files themselves were super cheap. It was like, I want to say I spent less than $50 on the files,
Okay.
and now I can make as many suits of armor as I want with that,
And you
right?
just, when you buy a file like that, is it always under the clause or contract of like indefinite perpetuity? Like it's yours? Or do people like rent you the files? Like you can print it for the next 2 months and then I'm taking it back.
Well, they can't take the file back. So the
Based on
worst they
how the
can do
service
is
works
not let
right
you
now.
re-download it. True. That is very true. But given the way computers operate today, I think it would be pretty challenging to do that unless you fundamentally changed the way 3D printing software worked and file
Right.
management worked.
Yeah. I mean, they're just big, right? You could theoretically be like, here's your Dropbox file. It's active for this time, but it's like yeah, you're right. Cause you'd have to stream the 3D file off the internet in order for them to own it still without it living on your computer.
Right,
And
exactly.
it's
My files are in my
gigantic,
downloads folder, and then I just like drop
right?
them into Cura.
So that really just becomes about the bandwidth of the internet, honestly, because if you could stream a 3D printed file size from a service, and fucking HBO
Mm-hmm.
Max owns their own little store, or let's be more close to something that's real, like Steam, like some sort
Sure.
of thing
Yeah.
like that, is like, we've added a 3D printing file thing, and you can buy
Mm-hmm.
it for $100 and print as many as you want, or you can have limited time access for it for $20, and we'll let you print it twice from the streaming site, and then your license runs out.
I see a future in which that is feasible, but it would take a lot of change to the underlying technology to
Got
make
it.
it happen.
So it sounds like the short version is everyone who's interested in 3D printing, fucking do it now and get into it now, because A, it's not
Yep.
as expensive as you think it is, and B, the shit's just out there like for free, like nobody's business, or for like no money. So for free, as far as
Yeah.
we're all concerned. And it's in perpetuity on almost every asset. So like buy your shit now before, we're in the VHS days, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Like
Right.
get out there and buy your tapes, because it won't be long before Warner Brothers will own it all and they'll rent it to you on the weekend.
Oh my God. What a horrible, horrible future.
But Ivan, here's where I think we're a little bit different. And I think we're aligned in our opinions. But I think the way that my brain automatically works is it goes to that next place where,
Sure.
how will business daddy capitalize on this cool thing that the baby's made for it, which is like how capitalism tends to function. And I don't have a complete
Absolutely.
distaste for it, because it does create a tremendous amount of opportunity while funneling it in kind of weird ways. Um, so what for you in 3D printing is like the ambition at all, other than just learning and making cosplay shit? Is that ever something you would want to do for like a professional job, or like get into that in a way, or it's just like a hobby? It's like painting shit for
It's
your
just a hobby.
apartment.
It's just a hobby. I briefly flirted with the idea of creating like physical prints that I would sell. And back in, I want to say 2020. Yeah, it was 2020. I created some like 2020 dumpster fire ornaments that I sold for Christmas time, and
That's
immediately
cool.
got like overwhelmed with orders, which was awesome. And then realized that doing this at scale is very challenging. And when you are working at scale and have to run maintenance on your printers, it can actually be pretty unreliable unless you are like really able to be a grease monkey and get in there, which I have become that way, but realized that I don't enjoy doing that all the time, which would be required for running a
Yeah.
business like that.
Yeah.
So
You need more people, because I mean, look at your shirt. You're the mind behind this. You're going to be the creativity behind it. And you would need like a business person to help balance you out in that way, I think. Do you think that's right?
I think that would be helpful. I did freelance for many years, so I'm familiar with the business side of things, but I hate
Oh,
the
I'm sure
business
you
side of
are, and that
things.
would make you, yeah, and that would make you great at it. But I'm saying that as someone who, dude, I'm like you. I'm the artist. I don't,
Yeah.
for me at my job, for example, like directing, I have an associate producer who's essentially my assistant. And the relationship between us could work any number of ways. But what I told him when he started with me, because I had one before him and she was great, she got promoted and she got replaced. And I told my new assistant, I was like, dude, look, this is very simple. Here's how I want the dynamic of workflow to happen. I was hired for creativity for the most part. This is a
Hmm.
show. They wanted to make funnier. They hired a funny person. They want me to show up and try to make the show funny. And it's my job to direct it. So from beginning to end, it's my job what we turn in, right? I got to
Hmm.
make sure that what we turn in is good. And I got to punch it up.
Hmm.
And I got a skill set and years of experience that enable me to provide that service for them. So that's what I'm going to do. Your
Yeah.
job is to make sure that that is possible.
Hmm.
Like a
Yeah.
first AD on a
Absolutely.
film set, whatever, however you want to look at it. the wardrobe's there, the camera's right, the crew is happy, everyone has lunch, at literally everything else. And that can be well delegated to other people involved in our process. But I don't want to check a fucking email about any of that stuff. I just want to show up and do the thing that I was hired to do specifically. And that is
Yeah,
bring the creativity to this. And it's not because I'm lazy, it's because I believe that we make a better product when you do the thing you're good at and I do the thing I'm good at. And here's the bonus:
absolutely.
while you do all of that, maybe depending on who you are, less fun work, especially if you want to do what I'm doing, I will teach
Hmm.
you how to do my job for free. Even though
That's
you
pretty
don't
great.
get to do it constantly, you'll get little chances to mentor, and not
Hmm.
everybody has to do that. But my deal is do that. Take that stuff away from me. A, because I'm not as good at it. And B,
Hmm.
because it needs to get done. And I'll put all
Yeah,
my resources into the thing I am good at so that we can make it as great as possible. And you seem like the kind of person, while you're very savvy all around, you're that person that if you had an enabler, someone who was like, I would love to take all the orders and ship all the things and run the website and do all of that. All you got to do is keep coming up with cool shit for us to make and maybe fix a machine if it goes down. That's like a pretty good deal. I'm saying this
that is a
selfishly
pretty
because I
good
want to
deal.
buy your shit. That's what I'm at. I just
I
want
love
you to
that.
make Christmas ornaments for me.
Well, I definitely still do prints for friends, so we can definitely work something out there.
Hook it
I
up.
just don't have a storefront for it.
Yeah,
So
for
I
now.
got you. I
That I,
got you.
if anyone listening just heard my advertisement or my help wanted ad, however you want to look at it, Ivan's hiring. I said it. So let's talk about let's talk about the AI thing then, as it affects. It's going to affect that for sure. It's definitely going to trickle into the
Yeah.
world of 3D printing stuff and these designs that you're paying for and stuff like that. I'm sure
No, for
AI
sure.
is being used to speed those designs up, to develop those things quicker, and maybe to completely conceive them from the ground up.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, software already exists to create 3D models off of a text prompt. I mean, software exists to do anything off of a text prompt at this point in time. It is
Right.
we're already at that point. So I'm not sure what that software is, but I have seen demos of it. So like I know it exists, right? But you can make videos, you can make 3D models, illustrations, fake photographs,
Right.
essays, right? You name it, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Just type in
Is
a few
it
words and off to the
let me
races.
let me I'm speaking of off to the races, I'm gonna give you kind of an open forum here before I get into any detail.
Hmm.
You're at a dinner party. Someone's like, Ivan, you're an artist, and you're like, indeed I am, you bow, or whatever your thing is. And
Of
then
course, of
and
course.
then they go, what do you think about AI? End of question. I'm going to give you no more detail. What's your response to someone like that who's like maybe even a little bit more outside? I'm an amateur. I don't know the shit, but I do have some like opinions and I've fucked with it a little bit. This is like your Aunt Carol, right? This is like
Yeah.
someone who's not, they don't know anything about it. They saw AI on Facebook as a term. That's what they know. They're like, what do you think about this? They said it's going to fuck up art. Is that true, Ivan?
Yes, it's true. It absolutely is true. It's already true. What
Why?
it's going to do is why? It's going to take, in the short term, the lower end of the market and completely and totally demolish it. And in the
Mm.
long term, it's going to come for the people at the top as well. Um,
What does that look like? What do you mean? Start with the first
so,
part.
yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about a small business that needs a logo. Historically, they would have to find a human being to design that logo for them, or maybe they have a nephew who's decent in MS Paint, but we're not going to worry about that person.
Sure.
So if they want to find an artist, they can go on Google and they can search for logo services and find a few businesses. Or since the market has already become oversaturated and the bottom of it is pretty low, they'll probably
Right.
come to a little website called Fiverr, where they'll get a logo for $5 from somebody in a third world country. That market instantly is pretty much going to evaporate if it hasn't already,
Right.
because why would I spend $5 to get something from somebody who I might not speak the same language as? when
Yeah.
I could instead type a prompt into Microsoft Designer or Dolly or Midjourney, although that seems like a little bit of work. So we'll probably just do Dolly. Hit enter, get something decent, tell it to change it a little bit, get something good enough, and then run with that because, I'm probably not super concerned about the logo. I just want something that looks professional.
Right.
That is most of the bread and butter, most of the work of a lot of designers who are working day to day and freelancing.
Right.
So it's going to immediately pretty much eliminate that part of the market. From there, as it gets better and as companies begin to realize, oh, we're spending a lot on designers and artists when we could be using this AI that is not amazing, but it's good enough, and then we can get an artist to touch it up.
Right.
Then they can replace a lot of their artists with artificial intelligence and just keep one guy on staff to, keep it up to relative par. But eventually they're not going to need that person anymore. So that is, in the short to middle term, what I see
Right.
in terms of the actual like day-to-day, business of visual creativity, at least like two-dimensional creativity.
Well, can't you still find some other kinds of jobs or something like that, Ivan? Can't you? Isn't there something for artists to do if the AI is doing logos? What can't you make paintings or something that people want because they're your paintings and they're not made by robots or what?
Great question. So some people will absolutely be able to do that. In fact, some people do that today. They're called gallery artists. You'll notice, though, that there are not nearly as many of them as there are graphic designers or digital illustrators. And you will also notice that their work is very different from commercial work. They have unique voices. They have really had the time and opportunity to develop their skill and their craft. And many of them also don't do that full time. The
Right.
ones that do are fortunate. So what's going to happen to these people is they are going to either have to really, really dedicate themselves to craft and learn a new or different type of visual art, which is the same as learning a different skill set because it is a different skill set. Or they will go into some other industry. And with the art world becoming so much more competitive because you're competing with machines now, it's going to be less and less viable and less of a good bet economically to pursue that.
But isn't this just like when they made computers and everybody who was an artist was like drawing with their hands, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh, we can draw with computers, so no one's going to get a job as artists anymore. But they still kept drawing, right? Or you learned how to use computers, or isn't this like that?
Yeah, drawing with an instrument, right? A stylus, but now you'll be drawing with a keyboard and typing sentences.
What
Is
do
that
you
drawing?
think that me? I'm going to break out of Aunt Carol now and just ask you a question.
No, you're good.
What what do you think? What do you think's to be done about that? I mean, is it just like not with a bang, but with a whimper, and just kind of like it was a fun time when we used to have that, and we just let it go, or like, is there a fight to be had? Is there an adaptation to the evolution that is to be had? Or is it just a quiet snuffing out of all these people who wish they could be artists for a living, but they can't because of the robots?
Honestly, I think it's the quiet snuffing out. There are legal fights that are happening right now, but
Right.
those are only going so far, and those are only going with copyrighted work, where authors and artists are saying, hey, you trained this machine on my book or my painting, and that is, you're stealing my copyright as a
You think
result.
there's
So it's a
hope
big
in that
question about fair
argument?
use. No, and the reason is because AI models already exist that are not trained on those. So if you look at Adobe Firefly, for example, that creates images that are entirely based off of royalty-free stock images. So you do that with images. It's not that hard to do it with text. I mean, you've got all this stuff that people put out for free on Reddit and on blogs, right? Not copyright
Right.
protected, and it's in these machines. And you can also just put it in new machines if you got to change your training set, right?
How do you
Think
how
of
do you
all the
feel?
books like Moby Dick in the public domain, right?
Right. Yeah, of course. And that public domain conversation just recently changed 20 years ago to actually being more than like a person's lifetime. Used to be
Yeah.
75 years for like ever, and then they made it longer because
Hmm.
fucking Disney wanted to hold on to their mouse that they're now losing anyway.
Yep.
Anyway, that ownership conversation I think is also valuable, but I want to stay on this for a little bit. So
Hmm.
then how do you let's just take it at face value, and then I want to backtrack it a little bit, but like, okay, I'll take for granted everything that you just said. And for what it most part, I think I agree. It makes sense. You know more about it than I do. That all hits my ears, very reasonable. How do you feel as a lifelong artist and someone who's invested their time and energy in not only creating art for a living, but in your spare time? How do you feel about how it affects your art making, money
Hmm.
aside? And then, kind of a second part of that question is the bigger one, which is how does it feel to be a part of an industry that's affected in this way?
Absolutely. So individually, for my own art, I've already stopped relying on my art for my income. So I do not in that way feel threatened by artificial intelligence.
Mm,
In fact, one big positive of separating my art from my income is the ability to really focus on what is important to me artistically as opposed to what's important to the market artistically.
mm-hmm.
And I believe that with all this AI art getting pumped out, that is eventually going to lead to this homogenization of art, that as if it already isn't homogenized commercially,
Right.
but it's going to do it even more. It's becoming an Ouroboros at this point. But um, what it does is that actually further emboldens me to lean into my own artistic inclinations, right, and lean into my own vision and my own style and my own techniques.
Right.
Um, so I am somewhat grateful because these are things I already wanted to do, and so this just emboldens me to do that.
Okay.
Now, that being said, being part of an industry that's being affected by this, I'm actually, it's interesting. I'm part of two industries that are affected by this because, you know, I am an artist, always have been, even though that's not what I'm doing economically anymore.
Right.
So seeing that happen to my peers and seeing that happen to the industry at large is just absolutely gutting and heartbreaking. And
Right.
um, it honestly terrifies me. I'm also now in the tech industry. And so being a part of the industry that is actually developing these tools or implementing these tools is really surfacing the importance of ethics in the creation of these tools and the deployment of these tools. And
Right.
so, even though I am not responsible for creating AI models, I am around people who do. And so I think it's very important to educate myself and educate my peers on the ethics behind these and
Right.
communicate openly and honestly about it, because the people making this really need to consider those things. I, at my own company, formed a group within the user experience department, which is the department I'm a part of, that is focused on researching AI and making sure that if we implement any AI tools in our software, that it's done in a way that really considers the user
Mm-hmm.
with as much empathy and safety and respect for privacy as possible.
Right.
Um, that doesn't mean not implementing AI. That doesn't mean using ethical models. That just means being very intentional about the way the user interfaces with those tools.
Right.
Um, so even though I'm not directly responsible for creating AI, by working in the tech industry, I feel a deep responsibility to be aware of it and communicate openly and honestly about the ethics behind it.
That makes sense to me. I want to share a parallel story with you and then kind of get into how I think this this evolution. It's very curious to me, and I'm very fascinated by how things happen. My parents, for my life, a little bit different before, but for my life, both worked in the same industry. My dad actually got my mom into it. They worked in automotive repair. And so they specifically worked in collision repair. So body shop, you get an accident, insurance companies like you should take it over there, you go over there. My mom or dad for all of the 90s and early 2000s would have written you an estimate and said it's going to cost this much. Sometimes they were a
Hmm.
manager or whatever, but that's the sector that they worked in. For a really long time, that job was a commission-based job. It was
Hmm.
all about your skill set to get the customer to choose to drop off at that shop because they have the right to then take it wherever they want or get their cousin Jimmy to fix it, whatever. The insurance company just gives them the check, says go wherever you want. It was a sales job because you had to sell the customer on dropping the car off. Then you had to sell the insurance company on as big of a repair as you could get away with, basically.
Right.
And the shop recognized that that number, that profit, was pretty much determined by that individual who was communicating with the
Hmm.
customer and communicating with the insurance company. So they said, look, most of your pay is going to be commission. It's going to be based on your sales. The more cars you can get dropped off, the more bigger repairs that you can convince them to do, the more money we will give you as a piece of it. Over the
Hmm.
years, the industry really shifted and it became less about the customer choosing where they would drop the car off. And it became more about where the insurance company suggested that you go.
Hmm.
And they said, of course, you're welcome to take it anywhere, but we have these preferred shops. And they started to set
Hmm.
up what they call direct repair programs, where they call the shop up and they say, look, we're nationwide. We have all the work.
Hmm.
We have all the money. So
Hmm.
if you will basically go along with us saying that this is the best shop and you work with us and blah, blah, blah. And if you'll give us a discount on the work, maybe 1% off the top or something like that, we will tell all our customers, go to that shop. We will suggest it.
Hmm.
Can't demand it, of course, but we will suggest it. And then it even shifted to where we're not even going to give the check to the customer because we have this direct repair program. We're just going to send the money to the shop. Customers out of the loop will take care of the whole thing. Well, now it's not really about getting the customer to drop the car off. And you can only push the insurance company so far to increase the price of the sale because the idea is to keep them happy so that they will send you more repairs. And what's really important is that you make the customer super happy because if they're not top notch, holy shit, blown away by your service, they're going to tell Nationwide, and then Nationwide's going to call you and be like, I thought we had a deal.
Hmm.
So it's not about selling to those people, it's about
Hmm.
pleasing them. This is now a customer service job.
Hmm.
Over the years, the insurance company would add more and more things for a service writer to do that weren't paid on sales. Like, I'm not going to see a commission
Hmm.
off of this, but it's part of servicing the account, sending pictures, making phone calls, writing reports, all these things that are now more of like what a salary employee would do. And
Hmm.
both my parents made the same money in like 1995 that they made in 2005. Like the numbers were the same
Hmm.
with no scale for inflation, especially after all the crazy shit that happened in that time period. There was
Yeah.
no adjustment. When they retired, my dad retired, he made the same money he made 25 years before he retired. And it was because the
Jesus.
insurance companies were basically like, why are we giving such a big fucking chunk of this customer's check to some guy who works at the body shop? We should just give him a
Hmm.
flat rate and service whatever cars we send. And we'll work out how much we're going to pay everything out. I say
Hmm.
all this to say my mom got a job years ago after my dad had retired as a manager. And they, at this shop, which was like a big commercial shop that many, many branches all over the country. It's a big, big conglomerate. And they implemented a new policy basically saying, we're going to do exactly that. The service writers are now going to get paid a salary and you'll work whatever cars we have in the shop. And for
Hmm.
most people, that meant a pay cut. They were
Hmm.
like, look, you're not going to make sales money anymore. And you're no longer how hard you work at the thing is not going to determine how much you get to bring home to your kids. So it's no longer commission based. You just get what you get. And guess what, buddy? It's less than you had before. And a bunch of people bailed out of the company. My dad's position on the situation was those scumbags are screwing over all these people. My mom,
Hmm.
who had been given a manager job now, took the side of the company of, we've been overpaid for a long time. Not
Hmm.
because we don't deserve money as people, but for what we were doing and the way the job had shifted. It didn't make sense anymore for it to work that way. This makes more sense. And my
Hmm.
dad, who my parents have been divorced for a long time, but they're still in contact and pretty much friends, especially since they're in the same business for so fucking long. My dad, he didn't talk to her for a while because he was so offended by the position she was taking of like, how could you turn your back on all of us and agree with the
Hmm.
man as they rip us off? And it was tough for me being between them, even as an adult, because I really understood where both of them were coming from, but I mostly sided with my mom because I was
Hmm.
like, as much as I don't want people to make less money, and of course, the insurance companies, all these people, they're trying to make money for the people at the top. I get it. But the point was sound, which is that the job has evolved. And we need to
Hmm.
rethink this whole fucking thing. And it is a drag that people like my high school educated parents who have no college degree, my mom didn't even graduate high school, not even a GED. They were able to make like almost upper middle class money because the job was about how hard you could work and it didn't matter what your experience or credentials were. And they took
Hmm.
that position away and made it this new
Hmm.
thing that people like them wouldn't have been able to profit from and provide the life they did for me. I do understand why that
Hmm.
sucks, but I also see that things evolve, things change. And sometimes there's a window of when it's great, and when that gets taken away, it can feel like an injustice. And I'm not sure that it always is. The snuffing out
Hmm.
of the artists that we're talking about is fucking sad because you and I love artists and we are artists and we give a fuck about our friends and our family. But it feels a little bit to me almost like, there was a time when being a factory worker was a skill set, and then all the robots started doing all the factory worker stuff, and all the factory workers had built a skill set across generations, and that skill set didn't fucking matter anymore. We don't need you. You don't need to do that anymore. And the question is it sad that there's no more factory jobs? Is it sad that the artist jobs are going away? Yeah, but it also feels like, isn't it great that we got what we got? I'm like a gratitude guy. I'm like, I'm glad my parents were able to find a way to make a really good living for me, despite their lack of education and experience in anything. I'm grateful for it. And it would be a drag if it was in the exact same situation right now today, but it isn't. And I'm just grateful that it happened when it did. And I hope we can find other new cool shit to replace it. But I just don't think I cry as hard when something like that dies as much as I don't want to see people I love in pain or without what they need. But it seems to be we got to do
Sure.
something. We got to do something
I think
else when the AI takes all these jobs away, like when the robots took the factory jobs away. We'll figure out something, right? Don't we always?
man,
What do you think?
I have
I know
I
I
have
gave you
so
a
many
lot.
things.
It's really
I
just
have
one
so
big
many things.
analogy, but
Yeah. So okay, I have I think three main things I want to say.
yeah.
Um, First is um, I want to tell you about a guy named Ned Ludd, who is very famous for creating the Luddite movement. Ned Ludd was a weaver during the Industrial Revolution, who was put out of work by these mass factory looms that basically could do the job of many weavers and much faster and for less money.
Sure.
Very early example of automation. So Ned Ludd and a bunch of other weavers got very angry about it and firebombed some of these factories and were called Luddites because they followed Ned Ludd. Now,
I feel
today
like I've
we use
heard
the term
Luddite in my life and never investigated
yes.
that. So now I'm finding this out. I love this.
Right. So I'm assuming you probably know the term Luddite, as most people our age do, as being, oh, somebody who just doesn't like technology or progress,
Right. Right.
which on one hand, you can make that argument. But I think the real thing that people are ignoring is that the Luddites were workers. This was a workers' movement. This wasn't about not liking technology. It was
Right.
about not liking losing your fucking job to a machine.
Yeah.
And those are two very different things. So this is always happened, right? Like people have always lost their work to automation. This has been going on for a very, very long time. So this is nothing new. So on one hand, there is this question of, is it right? And on the other hand, there's this question of, what are you going to do about it?
Right.
And it sounds to me like your parents were focusing on the two different questions. It sounds to me
Right.
like your dad was focusing on, is this right? And your mom was focusing on, what are you going to do about it?
Right. And I tend to
When it
fall into the
comes,
second category most of the time.
sure,
Just in a situation where I accept it's not right out the fucking gate. I'm like, yeah, that's fucked up. But I go right to, okay, but
yeah. Now, the other two things I want to say, one's about artists today, and the other is about what you said about the future. So for artists today, the market that I described, like the Fiverr market, right, where people
right.
are churning out logos for $5, which is, you know, peanuts. And that's real work, and they're getting peanuts for it. The way I
But
feel
without the
about it
website,
is,
they may not have that money at all.
that's fair, but also without that website, they would probably be charging more than $5
But how many would they
for a
sell?
logo. So
Sorry,
where
I
I
don't
am
mean to
with this
digress, but I'm just
is,
saying.
no, you're fine. You're fine. So where I am with this is, these are people who are already really terribly exploited, right? Like they are really, really fighting to be designers and to have this career, and probably aren't doing as well as they would like. Probably struggling if they're charging $5 for a logo.
Yeah.
So my question then becomes, if these people are put out of work, is it better to be exploited for your work, for your passion, or to never have the opportunity to be exploited for your passion and it just remains a passion? And I don't have an answer for that.
That's a great fucking question,
Because
brother.
I think that's what artists are facing today. Right? I think they've been facing it for a long time, and I feel like it's just getting worse, because I feel like artificial intelligence is exacerbating the negative effects of late stage capitalism, and artists are where we're seeing it very publicly.
Right.
Now, when it comes to the future, you talk about, you know, we've always been, okay, where is this ultimately going? And I think artificial intelligence is a great tool under their own economic system, because I feel like artificial intelligence is very good at doing what? Automating. And why do we automate things? To make life easier. Why are we automating things today? Not to make life easier, but to create more profits for the people who control the automation. Everybody else doesn't have an easier life, right? So people are being displaced, having to get new skill sets to find different types of jobs. Automation makes life harder for a lot of people. Does it create opportunities? Absolutely. Does it also mean that some people can't pursue their passion? Also, absolutely.
Yeah.
So something I think about a lot that I keep coming back to is are you familiar with the Unabomber back from, I think, the 90s, who
Timothy McVeigh?
no, Ted Kaczynski.
Oh, right. I always confuse them. My bad. Same time period. Gotcha.
No, you're fine.
Kaczynski.
He famously wrote a manifesto and mailed a bunch of bombs to universities and all sorts of places to kill scientists. And if you actually read his manifesto, which I recommend, it's fascinating, he talks about an automated future, and his fear is that we will eventually get to a place where, or well, I should talk about it in the past tense. His fear was that we would eventually get to a place where everything was automated, and either we were crushed by the economics of only a few people making all this money and everybody else basically just being, you know, workers, or we would enter a socialist world where everything was automated, and in his words, humans would be nothing more than domesticated animals. Now, I fundamentally disagree with the idea of like having everything automated, meaning we're nothing more than domesticated animals. I think that is the ideal future because it frees us from need and desire, and it frees us from need and allows us to simply focus on want and desire. Right?
Is that healthy?
You know, I would love for the problems I face in life to be determined of, is it healthy that I can do what I want all the time? Um, I would like I would like to discover that. We should find out.
Yeah,
But
maybe.
um,
I wouldn't want to give up
but
problems in my life,
so
but I say that
I'm
from a
sure there would
point of
still be
privilege.
problems, but I would rather the problems be creative or social than do I have a roof and food, you know?
Yeah, no, agree on
Um,
that. Agree on that.
so
But that's
I
a
keep coming
hierarchy.
back as
That's like a
I keep
Maslow
thinking
thing,
about,
right? Like that's about
yeah,
hierarchy of
Maslow's,
need, and we always will develop another layer of what we consider need because,
yeah,
like, you know,
absolutely.
that social thing again, that's a need that we found that out during the pandemic. It's like it's lower on the Maslow pyramid than we thought. We actually really do need to spend time around other people. Holy shit. Like at least in some way. And I think it's like
Oh,
you're
for
right.
sure.
It is interesting to accomplish that level of the hierarchy and see what the fuck is going on up here. I'm with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so that's something I keep coming back to. Um, he was trying to prevent that future. I think I think it's a good future. And I think since we have built the tools and are building the tools, for me personally, it's the only good future, the only good outcome I see of this. Other than just like hitting the reset button and like starting society from scratch, which, probably also isn't all that great. But
Can
at least
be.
we're not crushed
That sounds like a
by
fucking
capitalism.
nightmare. No, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think it's interesting because one of the things that I've found in talking to all of these artists on this show, and I just had a coffee with somebody who's an alum. We'll have him on the show later, but he's from the 80s. And we were having a really great conversation about the way that we all communicate, like the sensitive artist types and the way that we build things together. And I think that one thing that we know for sure, and you know this because you weren't thinking about 3D printing when you were a kid. That wasn't like a thing that you
Hmm.
ever thought immediately, like, oh, that'll be a fun medium for me to work in, is in filament. And you just don't occur to you. And then at some point someone was like,
Yeah.
hey, you have a paintbrush? Great. Also, did you know you can print out a Mandalorian armor in like a period of time that's gonna blow your fucking mind? You're like, whoa,
Right.
that's a really cool thing. And those developments, and I think that's what makes me like kind of comfortable with like I hate to see my dad upset, but
Hmm.
I believe in my mom's overall attitude of things change. You got to kind of ride it out. And I think it's hard to see all this stuff go away. But you know what? I wanted to tell you about this. I had a recently an anniversary with my wife, and we were
Congrats.
celebrating. Thank you. We're celebrating 2 years, and we looked it up, and I didn't realize this, but I guess all of the years of marriage have like a material that's like associated with it. So it's
Oh,
like the golden one is 50 and the silver's 25 or whatever. But like every
yeah.
year, somebody at some point like went and said every year is a different material. So like
That I did not
5 is
know. I knew about the gold
iron.
and silver.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like each year, it's like, oh, it's our iron anniversary, it's our golden anniversary. Like, and as you go down, as you would imagine, it becomes less sturdy material. Like the first year is paper. I say it's your 1 year
Interesting.
anniversary, that's your paper anniversary. And our second, which we didn't do gifts themed on that or anything. And then our second year anniversary was cotton. And so
Okay.
we'd never done it. And I was like, you know what? I think this year, let's do cotton themed gifts. Be fun.
That's cool.
And I felt bad about not doing the paper thing. So what I did was I made a coloring book for my wife that is printed on cotton paper that
Oh,
is
cool.
full on like dolly just things of I put in Asian girl, white guy, black and white Shih Tzu, and got a whole
Hmm.
bunch of different, and then occasionally threw in some detail and got some different environments and stuff like that. A few of them turned out weird, and I was like, no. But in a pretty short period of time, in a medium that I am just not feel like I'm talented in, which is like graphic art of doing something, making something like that. I wish I
Hmm.
could do that. When I was at school, I'd pay my friends to make logos and shit for me all the time because god damn it, I've tried, but it's just not my thing. And so I just simply wouldn't have given her that gift. as much
That's
as I
real.
would have
And
later down the road if I was like 50 and it's like our gold anniversary and for some reason I'm going to make her a coloring book and I've got a little bit more money in my pocket. I might call Ivan and be like, yo, here's 6 months notice. Make me a 20-page coloring book about me and my wife. And I'm going to give you
mhm,
like $1,000 or more to do that crazy shit because I want thought put into it and it to be specific. Here's a bunch of details, use pictures of our life, all that shit. And we could collaborate and it
mhm,
would be beautiful. I'm not anti that gift, but I didn't have the time or budget or thought to do that this time. But I was still able to
yeah.
give her the fucking cool ass thing that like she was obsessed with, thought it was so cool. And I could only do that with that automation. And that's where I
Mhm,
fell on that line of like, I felt guilty. I was like, I want to pay
sure.
Ivan $1,000 or whatever, I want to
Mhm,
do that. But it was just like,
mhm,
I feel like this is only within my means, even as an artist. this
mhm,
this thing I can't make by myself. I just can't. I like a big fan of The Office. There's an episode where Pam
mhm.
gives Jim a comic book that he's the star of.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And man, when I saw that episode, I was like, I both want to give that gift so bad. That is so
That's real.
cool. I was like, but I can't draw a fucking comic book. I'd be lucky if I could draw one cartoon picture of my wife and have it not look offensive. I'm like, this isn't my thing. I just like
Yeah,
I'll write a comedy movie about her, I'll direct a play for her.
yeah.
But like there's just some things that are outside my skill set and I'm kind of grateful for the ability to get a hold of stuff like that my
So,
imagination can conceive.
so I think that is a positive outcome of AI for sure. It makes me think of so back when quarantine first happened, right? Like
Yeah.
back when Napster, LimeWire, all that stuff back in the day, people like these record companies were saying, "Oh, they torrented, 50,000, 100,000 copies of this new Britney Spears
Right.
single, and we would have sold that." But no, they wouldn't have sold that because
Right.
all those people who
Right.
torrented it wouldn't have bought it, right?
Right.
You would not have hired an artist to make this gift.
No.
Um, so as a result of automation of AI, you were able to make this really special gift for your wife, and I think that's great. And there are going to be a lot of examples of
Right.
that. However, there are also going to be a lot of artists that are put out of work and that are displaced. And
Right.
to me personally, it's not worth that.
Mm.
Other people may feel differently. And also, the way I feel about it personally doesn't matter because it's happening, right? It's here.
Right. It's like that
So,
worth it conversation is kind of irrelevant because that's not a choice we're making as a group right now. Clearly, we're not able to make that
right.
choice.
It's where in the what are you going to do about a conversation, right?
Right.
And so I'm glad that you were able to make that gift for your wife. And I think that's a really wonderful gift. I
Thank
just
you. I
don't like
only did
the
this podcast
circumstances that made it
episode so you
possible.
could alleviate my guilt. I only want. I was like, I felt like shit. I need to talk to Ivan again, and he'll tell me it's okay, and then I can go to sleep.
I got you. I got you.
Thanks, baby. Um, no, I just think it's incredibly nuanced. Obviously, it's a complicated
Oh, yeah.
thing, but it also kind of isn't like it's more like when these other things have happened, right? The Luddite stories that you mentioned and the other ones I've mentioned, right? The
Hmm.
factory workers in the 1900s. And then music. I mean, holy shit, the emergence of like digital drum machines in the 80s, stuff like that. I mean, there's been these little different
Yeah.
pockets of stuff like that throughout our whole history. And what I think, here's where I think I jump to the next thing. I think the conversation of what's next is more interesting than the conversation of who's wrong. And
Hmm.
I don't get animated and engaged and want to debate with people about like the ethics of it. I'm not like someone who lacks ethics. I can totally agree with the concept of like, I think you're right. I don't think if I had if it mattered and it was real and I hit publish or print whatever on that coloring book and it was like Ivan and four other people will lose $30,000 collectively. Do you still want to print this coloring book for your wife? That is an actual choice we're going to make. And I'm like, No, I'll just buy her a fucking necklace. Like, if I, whatever, if that's what we're doing, like, goddamn, I guess I don't have to do it. But
Right.
I think it's like, because it doesn't work proportionally like that, because we're
Right.
not able to make that active choice.
Hmm.
I still torrented fucking music, even though I want to pay artists. I still
Hmm.
made that coloring book, even though I want to pay artists. I still blah, blah,
Hmm.
blah. But you know what I also did? I fucking bought music on iTunes for like 10 years that now I don't even know. Do I still own it? I have Apple Music. It's a subscription. I feel like I don't even own the things I own anymore. I don't know. But like I
Yeah.
gave that $2 a song. I pay my
Yeah.
OnlyFans creators. I do. I'm just saying. I to me it's like I want to put the money in the pockets of the people as often as possible, but I'm also like
Yeah.
it doesn't animate me in that same way to be like they're getting screwed and these poor. I just don't get that way because I'm like it's a drag that the wave is washing in, but I didn't do it and here it comes.
Yeah. No, I get that. I think what it means for art is very interesting. I think we're going to end up with a lot more very, very unique art made by fewer people. Not in the short term, but in the medium to long term.
I think you're right.
Because those are the only people who are going to be able to survive economically because they are going to be the ones creating something unique and different than what the AI eating its own tail is off of
Right.
everything that's been trained. So look into that future, looking at what art looks like in the future. I do think we are looking at very, very unique and expressive and cool art, just a lot less of it and from a lot
Yeah.
fewer people. Um,
Do you
and
think the skill of working with AI in artistic ways will become a sort of creative job on its own? Like, do you think the
it
skill
already
set
is.
of that text entry and stuff like that? Because the CEO of the company who wants the logo
Mm-hmm.
may just keep punching stuff into Dolly and be like, fuck, no, that's not right. But you
No, that
need someone
definitely
who's
is a
like,
job.
but you didn't tell it Art Deco. You didn't tell, they have the
Mm-hmm.
knowledge of those elements to at least inform the AI.
Yeah, those are called prompt engineers, and it's a job that exists today.
Oh shit. Okay.
That's a real thing. You can study prompt engineering and get a job in it.
Prompt
Now,
engineering.
absolutely, and it is a creative job. I would say it is closer to programming than painting. I would also say programming
Right.
is creative.
Right.
Um, I think it's very creative. It's just a different type of creativity.
Right.
Um, it's one that is economically viable in a way that picking up a paintbrush is not today.
Yeah.
And you can
But
feel however you want to
that's
feel
been
about
true
that,
for
right?
so
But
long, right? It's like even when we were kids, you go back 30
mhm,
years, it was like learn a computer if
yeah,
you're an artist. It's like to be in this day, oh, I'm not a fan of Photoshop and you call yourself a professional artist, or I'm not really fuck with like
hmm,
Illustrator. And you're like, what? Well, then we're not
right,
gonna hire you. Like, unless you just want to make stuff
yeah,
on the street with Venice Pier and fucking sell your caricature or whatever on the street, fine. Everyone's entitled to do
hmm,
that. But work as an artist has to lend itself, like you said, to a larger kind of usually corporate machine or at least a
hmm,
smaller business or something that's looking for that. Like, it's a very specific need. And it's been a long time now that just working with your actual hands and putting watercolor on a fucking canvas has not been a
hmm,
thing that people were like, go get that money, kid. Like it's been like
yeah,
150 years since that was a good idea to get a job in, it's been a long time that art has always been one of those things for not always, but for a very long time. It's gotten smaller and smaller with automation into being something you should spend your time on, whether it was music or whatever. I do envy the
hmm,
dancers because I'm like, man, how the
hmm.
fuck do you replace a dancer with a robot? Pretty hard to do. Sure, they will.
That's true. That's
Sure,
true.
they will, but watching a robot dance is still fucking lame. Later, I'm sure it'll be better.
You, right. You know, so I want to bring this up. One thing that
Yeah.
really struck me this week actually was so I studied as a scenic artist, right? So that's something that's very important to me. And it's one of the few professions in which you can still pick up a paintbrush and make a living.
True shit.
because television and theater are so important. At this point, television's really where the money is. Same with film, but you have to construct these sets. You have to physically build them. You have to paint them. You have to light them. These are all real jobs, fulfilled by lots and lots of people. And obviously, I'm preaching to the choir right now saying this, but I saw something that genuinely spooked me, and that is OpenAI's new model Sora, where you type in a sentence and it gives you a full-on video. And what spooked me the most was this video they had of a California town during the gold rush. And what immediately sparked my fear was there's this entire village, city, whatever, all these old buildings in the desert, weathered, with the camera painting above them, horses and buggies, carriages, people walking, all that good stuff, right? And I immediately thought about if this was an actual production, you would have a set designer researching the actual accurate houses, right? The actual accurate materials. You would have a scenic artist studying the type of dirt that existed, or exists in this landscape, and then how that dirt and the weather combine to affect the wood. What type of wood was available to the people building this? And so all this kind of technical stuff that creates a realistic and convincing image. This AI had absolutely none of that, but it was convincing enough. It was convincing enough being the key word. And so I think about...
And a single text prompt could make one of those adjustments. You'd be like, oh, the sand is too red. Here, new scene. Now it's brown.
Yeah, actually, that is very true. And so I immediately think about not just visual artists, not just graphic designers losing their work. I immediately think about set designers, technical directors, carpenters, costume, scenic artists, lighting designers, cinematographers, fucking directors, everyone who would have made that scene with a single text prompt. And I think the only thing other than total control that people would really be able to argue for is the accuracy, as to people can be more accurate than a machine can in terms of this research, in terms of this historical knowledge, at least for today. And I think that's one of the very few arguments you can make for why it's better to go with these teams of people than it is to enter a text prompt when all you need is a quick pan of a gold rush town.
Yeah, it's not gonna last very long.
I fucking hate that.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's not going to last very long.
Yeah, there'll be a little while where that's true, but then it won't be long before, like you said, we just get the guy who knows all that shit, get you, the scenic, designer, to sit down, but we don't need any painters or carpenters. So you just sit down at the prompt thing and about dirt, right? Great. Tell it what kind of dirt to put and what kind of wood to put or whatever thing, that would be great. Yeah. And we'll take a look at that and we'll go from there. And then later, after you've done it for us, 50 times, it will have learned everything you gave it at that time. Because of course I own it and I'm going to program it to learn from you while you're using it. Then we'll let you go, because now we have Ivan E, or we have Ivan GPT, and he's going to go ahead and make those choices for us and know all that shit. So thank you for your time.
Absolutely.
It's wild, man. You know what I hope for? And this is because so far, this is the thing that I'm like, ooh, I got a little more time. It still sucks at jokes. Fuck you, AI. You're not funny. I've heard some things it thinks are jokes, and I've seen, and that was the thing that made me get because I think everyone right now, everyone is Googling, how does AI affect fill in the blank my job?
Right.
I'm like, comedy writing, you still suck at that. I will take the win. But we're literally a year away from the Sora version of the comedy thing where I'm like, fuck, that's really good.
here's my question though. What is really good in the same way that me looking at the gold rush knows what's correct and what's a good job.
Yeah.
But you and I don't have to convince people to hire really good, right? They just
Right.
want good enough. They don't give a shit about really good. They
That's
give
true
a shit
too.
about good enough.
That's true.
So, are these things really good at writing jokes? No. Are they good enough at writing jokes? Maybe.
Yeah, they're certainly not far away from good enough.
Yeah. And also good
I
enough for who?
yeah. Yeah.
You know,
And what does that
people have
mean?
very low standards.
Well, and the thing that's really frustrating, dude, and this is the thing I've learned in television. I hope, there's nobody who is in charge of me right now that listens to this, so I'm sure I'll be fine. Um, but I mean this across the board, man. It's just part of the business of art, and this happens when anything gets really, 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 really big, which is you have non-artist people in charge of the money and the project
Mm-hmm.
that the artists work on, and the artists have the expertise on what is good or what is quality or how things are made or whatever, and the people at the top don't, and that's why they need us. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason why we don't have their jobs is because we don't want them, because we're artists and this is what we do. And that is
Mm-hmm.
fundamentally just part of how things have always worked in business. And I get that.
Mm-hmm.
And I still fucking
Mm-hmm.
hate it because it inevitably creates these situations where, I like the John Oliver term where business daddy is like, you need to do XYZ. And you're like, but I don't want to do that because it's a bad idea for the thing you want to do.
Yep.
It's not good. And they're like, yeah, but we really want, it's our money and we'd really like you to do it this way. And what I've learned in my career is after the first protestation, there's a second very mild one. It's like, sure? And they're like, yeah, I'm done fighting with you. You're business daddy and you
Mm-hmm.
want to paint it red and that's dumb. Let's put the green lights on stage. Let's do it. You tell me how the
Mm-hmm.
people's faces look. We'll talk about it. It's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Green, but it's green because it's like the earth. I get it. You've never seen someone's face bathed in green light, and I have. That's just the difference
Yeah.
of experience. That's all. So let's do the show. And then you can have everyone walking out of the theater being like, why does she kind of look like the Wicked Witch of the West? Because you don't get the fucking stuff. You don't know.
Yeah.
And inevitably, you just have to let that go and fail. And then later at the next meeting, we're all on board about blue light. Great. Because you saw how it looked last week, right? Yeah. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Lesson learned. And you just have to let it kind of fall on its face. It's a little frustrating, but I think that it's like it is inevitably part of how we as artists like have to work because you're not going to have very many artists that are up there making those calls because we don't climb to those
Mm-hmm.
positions. We don't want them.
Yeah. That's true. It's a tough spot to be in.
Yeah, it is. But it's the nature of it. And I think it's good too. It's kind of like people complain about censorship in
Mm-hmm.
television, especially. We probably have the most censorship other than, I don't know, radio. It's like we deal with the most. There are laws about you can and you can't and blah, blah, blah.
Sure.
And a lot of people bitch about that. I don't really so much. I find it a fun challenge. And it's not like we're not allowed to say anything. It's not like everything published on television has to be rated G. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I find the restrictions. And again, I think that's why I kind of thrive in the, oh no, this is going away. That sucks. But how do we get through it? Like, I don't know. It doesn't make me feel good to be sad. It makes me feel good to be challenged. It makes me feel good to be like, oh, fuck. Well, all right. Let's start walking in the rain. Car's broken down. What am we going to say? Cry in the car? We're already wet. Come on. Let's fucking go. On to the next town.
I mean, I get that, but I feel like there's a big difference between being creatively challenged and being economically challenged.
Yeah, I agree with that too. But I think
I love being
people who
creatively
set out
challenged.
to people who set out to be artists are setting themselves up to be financially challenged. Period. It's just a hard thing. It's always been a hard thing.
That's absolutely true.
I hate to see it
That's
get harder. Don't
absolutely
get
true.
me wrong. I've meant what I said earlier. I'm just saying, like, you shouldn't, I don't think, have just like everybody be like, let's be an artist. And no matter how, like you said, good or good enough they all get to make a living at it. It's like, I don't think that keeps the meritocracy of art in a good place, which is an important thing. Not that I want to be the legislator of it. I'm not. But I mean, there does have to be some scrutiny as to like, is it viable or can you do it? And don't get me wrong, I know a lot of really great, talented artists who should be making a living off of it at their skill level. They should. And we'd all benefit as a society for them making their art. But
Mm-hmm.
it's just
If
tough
they're
because
already
if there can
not,
only
it's
be,
probably going to get harder for them. And if our society would benefit from having them making that art, and they are now probably definitely not going to be able to make a living off of that and put
Right.
it out in society. I
Right.
say that's a net negative.
Yeah, I think it might be. But I don't know balancing it with what the other positives are. I mean, I think we're it's like that unique art that you talked about that we can't really predict. Like it's gonna push us in ways that we don't know. And like I was talking to
Mhm.
somebody recently who's a trumpeter and for the show. And he was saying like, it's crazy because it's very hard to get a job right now in music, which it's always been kind of difficult, but it's hard right now because of the skill level. Everybody's so good. So in order to get a
Mhm.
job, you have to be like crazy good. He's like, which is funny
Right.
because if you go back in time and you look at someone who played trumpet like 100 years ago, and he's like, if I took a time machine and went back to that time, like 100 years ago, I'd be the greatest trumpeter like on earth. Like it's just people have
Mhm.
gotten so much better at doing it because of conservatory schools and money for like sending kids off to just play the trumpet because he didn't have to work in a field or something. Like
True.
there's been such an explosion of people who want to be artists just in the last 100 years. There were way less people who even thought to spend time doing it, especially for a living. Because we're going to be a fucking
Mhm.
poet. Like, it's just like, it's tough because I want more artists because I like artists because I am one because I like art and I want there to be an abundance of all of it. I want more people like you to
Well, there is
talk
going to be
to.
an abundance of art.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. I want the
I know what you mean.
community aspect of it, and I don't want to hang out with Chat GPT and like talk to a robot who's issuing prompts. Or maybe I will because it'll get so good that I'll be
Mhm.
like, you know what? Ivan GPT, can't tell the difference. Jaw's a little stiff on the robot, but other than that, pretty much like hanging out with the real guy. I don't know, we'll see. But until that point, I don't want to be surrounded by that as my community. I do this
Yeah.
podcast because I want to connect with other artists. I want to talk to people. I want to be involved in that. I don't want that to go away. But at the same time, I don't know. I get it.
Yeah.
It all seems like a natural evolution to me, and it's a drag. But I'm gonna figure it out. And I hope that for everybody else. I hope that you mourn and you grieve whatever we can't save. But get in the fucking lifeboat. You don't have to jump off the bow of the Titanic just because it's going down. Like, swim, motherfucker. We all got to
Hmm.
swim. That's just my attitude about
Hmm.
it in general. We all got to fucking swim. And we can bitch about how they should have steered it and I shouldn't have got on this boat. Yeah. Water's cold,
Right.
buddy.
So what are you going to do about a question?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's where we are.
Which is the most interesting question to me. That's subjective,
Hmm.
I'm sure. But to me, how we got here and where we're going, it's not even how we got here should look, will inform. But this is the thing. And this is like where are we going is like endlessly fascinating. This is why I wanted to talk to you about this. And I really appreciate your insight on it because I feel like there are a lot of really loud voices about this at the top or in the world of
Hmm.
like rich ass famous people talking about it. And I want
Hmm.
to hear more conversations about people who are on the ground making their living doing this kind of work who are going to be affected by changes like this, who have
Yeah,
just this nuance of an opinion.
absolutely. I appreciate you having that interest and bringing me on your show to talk about it.
Yeah, man. Thanks for being candid about it. And I hope we can chat more about it in the future because it's
Yeah.
one of those things, but it's never going to stop being interesting. It's going to keep being, oh shit, the Sora thing that happened in between now and the last time we
Oh,
talked.
yeah. Right. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and
And
now my job's irrelevant. Last time it was just you.
Jesus, it's yeah, it's really wild. It just keeps moving so quickly, and it's only going to continue to move more quickly. It's exponential at this point, right? Like 1 year ago, we had Will Smith eating spaghetti. 1 year, and
Yeah.
now we have Sora.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that they
So
named it after the Kingdom Hearts character. That's where my brain went. Because I'm a fucking
me
nerd.
too. It's
Yeah.
like what is going on
I
with
was like,
this?
I literally expected to see some Kingdom Hearts shit when I first saw the thing, and I wasn't really reading it. I was like, oh, what is this? It looks animated, or all, kind of, or not. I don't know. No, it's like, oh,
Right?
this isn't
OpenAI
one of
now
my
partners
favorite
with
video
Disney.
games.
Can
Ooh,
you
oh
imagine?
yeah. Well, and that's the thing. I think if anything, I think they. It's not so cold. I don't mean it this way, but they go first. The animators are smoked, man. They're
Oh,
because that's
Secret
the
Invasion
easiest
already
thing
had
to
AI
make.
credits, right? Like, yeah, the Fallout TV show used AI generated art as promo art. It's already happening all around
Yeah,
us.
absolutely.
Yeah,
I just be glad that I work with bags of meat for now.
yeah,
Be
that's
grateful.
real.
Ivan, thank you so much for chatting with me, man. Taking the time, I appreciate it. I'm sorry I was late. It's not a
No,
reflection of
no
how I
worries.
feel about you. But I really look forward to having you back on the show, man. I think we should just check in on a regular basis. We'll have like a where are we at with our art falling apart conversation, like check in.
I would be down with that. God, I have so much that I wanted to get into about AI that we didn't even begin to scratch the surface of. So there's more. There's
Save it
definitely
and we'll
more.
come back and we'll hit it again. I can
Yeah,
be a little
we will
overpowering in the interview, so you just have to
for
space
sure.
it out.
Yeah, absolutely. I look forward to it, man. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks, dude.